Yeah, I've had that happen too. Yeah, because you put it in a regular envelope, it's gonna rip out, but because they're so damn heavy.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
late for that information.
So this episode with Matt Jenatscheck is special to me because I'm just minding my own business one day, and I get an email from the main ATO email, and it was forwarded to me. I didn't have access to that at the time, so I get this page and a half email about from this officer that worked all the way up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and it kind of starts off like, "Hey, I've been listening to your show, and I was involved in an OIS on this date and time." I can't get into the facts of the case, so he tells me that he believed, because after listening to our show, that he was able to use the leadership qualities that he has heard from some of our guests to survive the shooting, and then the mental health education that we're always putting out there. He felt that it helped him understand how to mentally process the shooting. So it was like, wow. So I remember it was right before one of our board meetings, and Justin Bowen had printed out a copy of it for everybody at the board meeting, and kind of just to show us what kind of came through the wire. So to this day, I still have a copy of that email in my office hanging up, and I actually called him, and we had a good conversation. And he really liked Bane's episode. He really liked Tina's episode because she's from Iowa too. So I had both of them call and talk to him, and he was very grateful. Well, many months go by, and he just reached out again and said, "Hey, we have a new chief here in Cedar Rapids PD, and he was wanting to start up a wellness unit similar to what y'all have going there, and he was going to send some of us down here to spend a few days with y'all and kind of look at your policies and see how you operate." It's like, sure, come on down. So they come down, and they're here. They're here for like 4 days, and it was really cool to get to know Matt a little bit more and his team. And his wife, Jennifer, she came along too. And so while they were here, I said, you know what, I'll tell you what, how about we do an episode on your life and story and then how we connected. So we sat down and we did that. Another little side piece to his story is that he grew up in Iowa, and the TV show Dallas SWAT, he was a huge fan of that. Huge fan of Steve Claggett because Claggett is from Iowa, kind of like a hometown hero. Well, I asked Steve if he would come in and sit in and be a part of that, and he agreed. And I surprised Matt with the great Steve Claggett, and it was pretty funny to watch Matt walk in this room right here and see Steve here. Great handshake hug. Steve, he actually asked Steve for an autograph, which Steve, if you know Steve, he was happy to do that. and then, and we had a great recording, and he talked about a story about the Rolodex and about the images that just flashed from bad scenes that flashed in your mind over and over and over from different scenes that different traumatic events he had gone to. And I have heard that from other people dealing in the wellness unit, and it was a fascinating to hear that. But I thought the story came out great. It was nice to sit down and connect with somebody from 800 miles away to come down to Dallas, Texas and tell a story. And we still continue that friendship to this day. Well, as we were packing up, and he and Claggett and the other team kind of were out just outside the door, I was putting away the mics. Well, his wife kind of hung out and lingered. And I made a comment like, yeah, so I made a comment about our little show. And she's like, no, this isn't just a little show. We are doing a really touching and resonating with people, and it's helped our marriage and our way of life so much. So anyway, I thought that was pretty special to hear that from somebody so many miles away.
It is kind of intriguing that you started this kind of as like, hey, I want to tell some cool stories about some Dallas cops and do some things, and it reached all the way out as far as it's reached.
Yes, the mission has been accomplished, and then other missions that I did not even think about or foresee we've also accomplished some of those, and those have been kind of a focus. Another tie-in with Matt is that he reaches out to me, not after every episode, but a lot of the episodes, and he really reached out to me after Andre Taylor's. And because, again, Dallas SWAT guy, so he's all into that. Well, after listening to Andre's multiple times, he says, he decided to stop drinking himself. So now, time of this recording, he's like over a year sober. And it kind of goes back to this stuff we put out here resonates with people in different ways. And Dre's episode meant something to him, and now he's incorporated that into his life to be better. It's pretty special.
She and her son were walking out of the store that day to the parking lot, and she was ambushed by him, and she was stabbed 32 times. I mean, she had stab wounds that were through and through. There were marks in the concrete under her body from the knife that had gone through and chipping the concrete underneath. So it was a very brutal murder. Her 7-year-old son sat and watched the whole thing, and he had the bags of groceries in his hands, and he ran all the way home. I'd gone this far in my career, and I'd been able to handle everything. And all of a sudden one day I wake up and I'm like, why am I remembering this suicide from 1997? Why am I remembering this female we found dead in her house from 1999? You know, and these things just kept flipping around in my head. And that's kind of how I equated it to the Rolodex, is that these images would flip around and they would either go super fast or they'd go super slow. And I dealt with this for almost a year, and it was daily. You guys had already had a bunch of episodes out, but just listening to the leadership that is presented down here at Dallas PD is pretty remarkable, and some of the people that were speaking. But then listening to people talk about their critical incidents and how they got through them, and you know, it's powerful. And I think that helped me when this moment hit to recognize that, you know, this is not normal to feel the way I felt.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal,
And we can learn from those mistakes.
and together we can bridge the divide.
Welcome back, ATO family. This is Joe King. I'm with my partner, Kent Wolverton, and today we have the honor of sitting with a guest who traveled over 800 miles to Dallas to join us. The definition of a watershed moment is an event marking a unique or important historical change, of course, of one on which important developments depend. We all have defining moments that forge our path or create a new why in our life and profession. On July 30th, 2022, today's guest's life changed, professionally and personally, as he faced death. Looking down the barrel of a rifle less than 10 yards away, from the moment the rifle was leveled at him and shots were fired, his life would be different. These watershed moments can occur quite often in the world of a first responder. Our guest has over 26 years of law enforcement experience, 21 years marrying IOPD, now slips on vest and gun belt for Cedar Rapids IOPD. He's married to his wife, Jen, father to the beautiful Chloe and Haley. Now, from growing up on a dairy farm, being a lawman nearly 3 decades, to enjoying the much warmer weather and southern hospitality of Dallas, Texas. It's the ATO Officer Foundation honor to sit down with Matt Jenatscheck. Matt, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we have a special guest co-host, also from the same state. Y'all have heard his voice before. Matt demanded he come on and be a part of this. Growing up as a young officer, he actually watched Dallas SWAT, and I think he might have been the only one in that state that watched it. But hey, we're back with the great Steve Claggett. Steve, thank you for coming.
Stop. I'm shaking my head no, trying to get him to stop, but he won't.
No, you deserve it. All right. Seriously, we're also here with Sergeant May Laura. She's retiring soon. She's Cedar Rapids PD. She's sitting next to me. She doesn't want to speak, but I'm going to make her talk later. But thank y'all for being here. We actually have an entire Cedar Rapids Iowa PD team down to take a look at our wellness unit and pick it apart and go back and tell them that we don't know what we're talking about. But,
I don't think that's the case.
yeah, but it's been a great few days with them, and I'm sad to see them go here today. But we're going to document their visit through this recorded, and also document Matt's life and career, which I think the ATO listener is going to find very interesting and inspiring. So, you ready to dive into this?
Yes, sir.
All right. You don't call me sir. I'm nobody. All right. You said in your bio you grew up on a farm. Can you kind of tell us about growing up in Iowa and just what was that like? Steve's going to know, but I want you to. I want to hear from you.
This time of the year, it's cold. I was born in Fort Dodge, Iowa. I was about 4 years old. We moved to Northeast Iowa. My parents divorced early. I think it was 1982 or 1983. My dad moved on to Illinois, Nebraska, Kansas, and eventually he passed away living in Arkansas in 1999. Early on, it was my mom and my half-brother, Frank. He passed away 2 years ago from alcoholism. And my mom remarried in 1985, and she married a guy that was a dairy farmer. And at the time, in 1985, it was a fairly large dairy farm in Iowa. We would milk over 200 head of cattle. And it's, that's 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So we didn't get to take vacations, and we didn't get to do that stuff that, lots of kids do growing up.
I think it's the equivalent of baling hay here in Texas. It's hard ass work, and it's long days and nights, and and it's
yeah. But you don't bale hay every day.
No, it's
twice
true.
a day.
Yeah,
Most times you have to milk twice a day.
Wow.
And I've heard you can milk anything with nipples. Is that true?
Yeah.
Take off your shirt. Let's find out.
I've got nipples, Greg. Can you milk me? Meet the parents reference. See, this totally went off the rails.
You're welcome.
Steve's walking out. No, come back, please. Steve, come back. Don't leave.
He still has his shirt off. We're
yeah,
good.
It's okay. He's mad that you asked me to take my shirt off, and
Wow, it went south fast.
Nobody listens. Don't worry about it.
Hey, don't worry. Nobody listens to this anyway.
Joe Rogan probably is, though.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Oh,
Yeah.
he's the number one fan for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. Yeah, he's welcome on me anytime. Matt, what got you into law enforcement? What got your interest in that field?
Somewhere at home, I've got a picture of me in a pedal police car when I was 4 years old. So I've always been, I think, intrigued by the uniform and just the job. My mom's cousin he is a retired California Highway Patrolman. I hadn't met him up until about 5 years ago, but there was just always something about the job and the TV shows that you grew up watching, the Chips and Hill Street Blues that my brother always made me watch with him. And obviously later on in life, Cops came on TV. And, if you got into law enforcement in the mid to late 90s, you were probably inspired by Cops.
Chief Garcia is going to be lighting a cigarette lighter after hearing this and you saying that, because he says that every time too. He says that if anybody's that started in the 90s that didn't say that Cops didn't have an influence on them and joining their line.
Yeah, I believe that.
What other shows did you watch that were law enforcement geared that you liked, enjoyed, that may have a local flavor?
Dallas SWAT, obviously, as I got on the job and everything. Yeah.
Well, what about that show? I mean, I watched it too, but what about that show spoke to you from Dallas, Texas, and all the way going up to Midwest? And what was your perception of Dallas PD at the time watching that?
That Steve Claggett was pretty badass. I don't know.
I've got a knife. Just so you guys know, I have a knife in my boot.
Hey, we agree with that. And why do you think that we continually invite him on here? It's
Right.
not, it's
To abuse me.
well,
That's all it is, to abuse
no,
me.
There's a small element of that, I'm sure.
yeah, no. He is a badass, and that's why he's on here, and that's also why everybody that watches that show that I've talked to, it's his name is brought up quite a bit.
Yeah, I think just the show itself had to be a good recruiting tool, I would think, for Dallas PD, but watching that show, or whether it's that show or Kansas City SWAT or whatever it was, law enforcement's the same no matter where you go.
Yeah.
It's just the volume of the work that increases. The job's the same.
So you always had an interest. Actually, you talk about the pedal car. I have a picture of me when I'm younger than Carmen, sitting on it's like a little police motorcycle, motorized with the old cheap ones with the batteries, and it's a little cop motorcycle. I still ride it, but I've always had an interest in getting in this profession, and I always wanted to do it in Dallas. So did you start applying? What age did you start applying for PDs?
I was 21.
Oh, wow, young.
Yeah, I applied at a couple real small towns.
Okay.
One of them was my hometown area, and I actually got hired by them. I spent 4 years on that department, and that was a 9-man department.
Wow.
So I was there for 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, before I moved on.
And then where'd you move on to?
My wife graduated college in 1999, and she got a job in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and it was about an hour drive. And I think that she just got tired of the commute, and I always wanted to work at a bigger department, so we moved to Marion, Iowa, and I got a job with them.
Steve, do you know where that's at? Marion?
Suburb of
Okay.
Cedar Rapids. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never been up there. I may have to come up and visit y'all after this. So
Yeah.
if y'all have had me, I'll come up and visit. I've never give me a reason to come up there and
You have to actually wear pants up there, though. It's weird.
do. Can I get to milk some nipples? That's the only reason I'd want to go up there. Steve, please, Steve, come back. Don't leave.
Can I jump in with some serious stuff here?
Well, we're gonna get to very serious. So I'm trying to loosen them up. I'm trying to loosen myself up. Laura's over here shaking her head. She's gonna walk out too. No worry, we can take any of this out, but I'll leave all that in. What did serving mean to you? You know, when it comes to serving others, and what drew you to that?
There's a little bit in my bloodline. My mom was a school teacher. So on my dad's side of the family, I've got a cousin who he recently retired from the Army. I don't remember what rank, but he was pretty high, and he made a really good career of that. I've got another cousin who is a deputy sheriff in Columbia County, Wisconsin. So he's, I think, 2 years away from retirement. And then his brother is a Capitol security officer in Minneapolis, or for the Minnesota State.
So you only applied for basically every department you applied for, you got on.
I applied for a couple other ones too, and just didn't turn those down or didn't get them. Yeah.
Anything out of state?
No.
Okay, you just want because Jen took the job and you wanted to stay. You wanted to stay close to home.
Yeah, our families were there, and at the time, I think that was just the best for us, was to stay close to family. And I did later in my career in Marion, I applied for the Iowa State Patrol and made that through to a conditional job offer, and then talked myself out of that and stayed with PD work.
Your wife Jen is here, and I have a question for her. So, once he decided he wanted to get into law enforcement, what did you think about that?
We were young. Matt and I met originally, I was in high school. I was a sophomore in high school. He had graduated high school. And so we were kind of high school sweethearts. And we got together and dated for many years and got married. And then you were actually we were married when we went into law enforcement already. So you started your career before we got into, sorry.
You're good.
You started your career before we got married. So
I know the climate was different for law enforcement back then in the country.
I was naive.
Okay. You say, just say,
I
were you
was. I
worried
was
about
young.
the danger? Worried about the danger of it?
I didn't think about that. I was young and very, I would say, naive. I grew up in a household. I mean, I grew up on a dairy farm. My parents, they were young when they met. We didn't see a lot outside the farm, you know. I went to high school, and we were from a very small town. And I would say going into this profession and him being in law enforcement, I entered it pretty naive.
Well, a lot of people do. I mean, most people don't have a really good feeling of what police work is about, and also what their family member or their significant other is actually getting into, right? Nowadays, I think it's more out there because there's so much more in the media, and a lot of it's negative. Anything negative stands out more than a positive thing, right? I mean, you can go back to the old, the Andy Griffith show, and and Norman Rockwell paintings of police. That perception of police and the outlook on police is way different than it is now. We only hear about police really if it's something, sadly, if it's something negative. There are some positive things there, but usually the media kind of jumps on things from a negative light. So now, I mean, I can't imagine starting this profession right now in the climate that's in. Back in when was that? Like, what year was that?
1996.
Oh yeah, okay. So we started around the same time, and that wasn't when the country was looking at. I mean, police were not looked at like they are now. So being a significant other, a wife, you wouldn't really see you wouldn't have the fear of, oh my God, you're going to get like ambushed. I mean, there's always a chance of getting into a gunfight. Going back to when policing started, the Robert Pill modern American policing, but you almost don't even feel safe going to a restaurant to eat.
Right. I remember in Marion, he would come home and he would tell me what he had gone through that day or that night at work.
There were a lot of those "you're not going to believe this shit" type of stories.
Yeah.
And in a smaller town like that, a lot of the people you're dealing with. In a big city, we don't know the people. We might be like, hey, this is the cook at the restaurant we eat at, but we don't really know who he is. Smaller town, you probably have a little bit more intimate knowledge of who people are. Yeah,
and that my first agency with 9 people, 4,500 population, you were a cop 24/7, 365 days.
Right.
You couldn't go to Walmart without somebody coming up and talking to you and asking you a question, or to a restaurant. So yeah.
And that's a unique perspective there. And now back to Jen, I don't think that any of us really, unless you grew up with a police officer in your family, we're all naive as to what it is to be either in law enforcement or in a relationship with someone who's in law enforcement. So don't beat yourself up on that. It's not normal to understand what people are going through until you've gone through it.
I totally agree with that. I feel like just the news, the media right now, over the years that's evolved. It seems like all the bad stuff makes the news, and that's what our kids see. That's what we hear, like weekly, daily, about all the bad. And with everything that's gone on, I would say it's also taken an impact, being in law enforcement, just children in law enforcement.
Yeah, for sure. The kids suffer that also, but I don't think it's easy for everyone to say, the police are bad, but I would guarantee you there's thousands of people that would say Officer Janatscheck's a great man. Officer King's a good dude. And it's real easy to paint with a broad brush, but it's really hard to hate individuals. And I've always said it's easier to be in someone's face and have them tell you how they really feel, because they'll say, oh, I don't like the police, but you're a great guy, and there's a lot of that goes on.
They kind of get lumped into, you get one bad cop, and then they get lumped into that assumption of almost every cop's bad. And it's a stigma that I would say you guys have to carry a lot.
And it's gotten way worse over the last few decades, really. It's just been, and it's snowballing. And I think it's getting a little better lately, but that can turn on a dime. And every time there's somebody across the country in another state that does something, or even out here in Dallas that do something that makes us all look bad, we know that broad brush we're gonna be right underneath it, and everybody we're lumped in. I mean, and I don't see any other professions that get lumped in for something so negative like policing. Like you hear about some churches, some priests, pastor. You hear about bad behavior, but you don't see people going across the country and protesting and tearing up a town over that. Or you hear about doctors that are that malpractice, and then they intentionally, in some cases, kill people and
right.
Permanently damage them. But you don't see the global protests, that you do against police officers in this profession. And that is a lot to carry for us now, but it's kind of the way it is, and you just kind of have to adjust. But as we're adjusting out there in the field, and we go through that emotionally, you're carrying it home, and it's affecting everything that you go home to, and they have to do it because while you're out at work, they're sitting there with the anxiety that, oh my God, Matt's at work, and and is he going to come home? That's a real concern. It's always been a concern, but even more so now, because there's the information is at everybody's fingertips now, and it's so readily accessible.
Right.
So you went to Marion PD. Can you kind of talk about that department? What are some of the units that you worked on?
I had the opportunity up there to every assignment that I put in for, I was granted an opportunity to work in. Minus crime scene and canine, which were two things that just didn't have any interest to me. But, patrol officer, I was an FTO, I was on our SRT entry team, I was a sniper with our SRT, DEA drug task force, I went into investigations, and I was also part of a Homeland Security Investigations Task Force. And then in 2017, I was promoted to patrol sergeant. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Would you... Going from a troop to a supervisor, how did you feel about that? Was it what you thought it would be, or was it better or worse?
I was talking about that earlier. I didn't take that promotion for the right reasons. I took it looking forward to retirement and bolstering that retirement.
That's the right reason.
Yeah, and that being said, the impact that I made on some officers as their supervisor, looking back on it, I think had a bigger impact than what that's going to make on the retirement.
Do you think your experience as a supervisor has helped you now that you've gone and joined another department and started over?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's given me a different vision on what leadership looks like and what it should look like and what I'm seeing. Yes.
Right.
Here's always my question with police supervisors. Did they teach you to supervise, or did they teach you to lead? Because there's a big difference.
There is. They taught us to supervise.
Okay.
To
manage people.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've talked to some people about that too. I think that we handled discipline wrong. We would discipline because people didn't know how to correct the problem.
Right.
And so we were really quick to hand out discipline because that was the solution.
Okay.
To where the real solution should have been, let's get to the root of the problem.
Mentorship.
Yeah.
Very
Why
much
did
so.
that happen? Why did you make that decision? And what can we do to make sure that doesn't happen again? Instead of just handing them the piece of paper with the threat of, here's your discipline, you do it again, this is what you're facing, this is what you're facing. So, yeah, we were taught to supervise.
Okay. I think it's very, very typical of most departments today. Supervisors are easier to, I hate to use the word control, but basically have them follow a line than leadership, because leadership looks out for their people first and then department second. And I think right now they want leaders that will toe the line.
I don't know that we even have any sort of training. Like when I went through my supervisor school, my sergeant school, they didn't teach us any of the stuff we needed to know, like how to do the job. Like nothing how to do your payroll systems, nothing about how to do the daily details that you do at every police station. None of that stuff was taught, it was more about the disc model. You know, we did a lot of those weird disc model deals. We talked about a lot of theories, but there was no actual leadership training. And I don't know that I believe that you can be taught how to be a leader. I think that you could learn it, but I don't think it can be taught, if that makes any sense.
Right.
Well, I think a lot of people promote. You said you promote it for the wrong reasons. I think there was a lot of people because you were looking for retirement, and basically that is not a bad reason to promote. But as long as you take care of the other things too for the right reasons, I think a lot of people promote just to get more power and in some case be a bully. And we see that at every rank, and usually people, the first time they get that first supervisor role, they're going to use that, and you see them climb higher in their career. And Steve, you know, and we all have. They use that as basically a bully pulpit to continue that, and the higher they go, and then that's the wrong reason right there. For your financial future and promoting, that is not a bad reason.
Well, I was telling Kent that 2 weeks before I was offered the promotion, I was asked by an officer, like, are you ever going to take a sergeant's promotion? I said, absolutely not. I'm in investigations. I'm working Monday through Friday with weekends off. Why would I do that? And then 2 weeks later, the chief presented me the opportunity, and a few hours later, we thought about it, talked about it, and thought that was the right thing to do. But
yeah, I'm still on the bottom of the totem pole, and I'm not going to change on that. And so Sergeant Wolverton here, he was a supervisor over SWAT for a while, and he went to the K9 unit right after that, Kent.
Yep.
And then you have somebody like Steve Claggett that you took a lot of more of a leadership role in the SWAT unit than y'all had such a core group though.
Yeah, it's different because you get into a unit like that, and your leadership, and it's the same way as on the street, your leadership can either be deliberate or dynamic. The deliberate stuff's the day-to-day, the grinding out, the paperwork, telling guys where to go, and then the dynamic is when the oh shit moment happens. And sometimes you get guys that'll step up that aren't leadership because leadership's not there or
Right.
not in a position to make calls, and they'll step up, take control, and win the day, which is a good thing. Mission success, no matter what it takes to get there. So,
Yeah, walking away, going home at the end of the night, that's the most important.
absolutely.
So, how many years did you spend there at Marion?
20 years and 8 months.
Okay, well, that's okay. So, that is half your life.
Yeah.
Of spending going from a very young man, to 2 decades at a agency. So, what made you leave that agency? I mean, there was a reason you left, and we don't even really get into why. But how hard of a decision was that to I'm going to make this change? And can you kind of walk us through that?
First, it sounds bad, but I was kind of bored. I was bored with what I was doing at the time as a sergeant, and it just kind of became mundane. Cedar Rapids Police were offering a lateral transfer program where you could come in salary-wise at your years of service. You'd come in at that salary level. And for me, that wasn't a huge financial gain because I was making sergeant pay at my other department. I mean, it was less than $1,000 difference. So it wasn't like I was making bank by making that move. But I think first and foremost, I think I was kind of bored with everything that was going on right then and there, and I needed a change. I saw some stuff in leadership that I didn't like. I think some of the leadership we had was subpar at best, but I don't blame them because it was what we saw growing up on that department with the older guys. It's what we were taught. It's what we knew. And so I just thought it was time for a change. This opportunity came up. Jen and I had a lot of conversations about it.
It's a big move.
It was huge because I was giving up rank, I was giving up seniority, and yeah, it was a big decision to make.
Can you describe the department size, like Marion versus Cedar Rapids? Like how big is the department? city too?
Yeah, Marion had an authorized strength of 48 officers. I
Okay.
think we were at 46 when I left.
Wow, pretty much capacity.
Yeah, that's not the case for them right now.
Wow.
Population was around 42,000. Cedar Rapids has an authorized 228 officers and 135,000 people approximately.
Okay.
So about 5 times. I mean,
What is the crime like in Marion versus Cedar Rapids?
Marion is a bedroom community. We don't have a lot of commercial property in that city, and so your crime is your juvenile stuff, your criminal mischief calls,
Burglaries, like home burglaries.
more some residential and some commercial burglaries. A lot of domestics,
Okay.
But
So for some of our non-police listeners, in the police department, a lot of what you do is based on your seniority, like your days off, the shift you're working. If you want to take the actual holiday off, you have to have some time there. So to take 20 years of experience and tenure with a department and start all the way over again, you're going to one of the more undesirable shifts, either late nights or evenings. You're not going to get good days off, probably a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Wednesday, Thursday.
all right.
So that's a huge decision for you to say, hey, I was a pretty tenured sergeant, over 20 years on a department. To leave that and go someplace else and not have a huge financial gain just because you wanted to do a little bit more and really assist the community that you were living in because there were more problems there. That's admirable.
And that was tough. I gave up 400, 500 hours of leave that I had in my bank.
Wow.
And I started with 0 and started earning 16.6 hours a month. That first year I was there, I think I took like 6 days off, and I'm like, I took 6 days off a month prior to that. It was just, it was crazy.
And how old were you whenever you got to Cedar Rapids?
46.
Okay, that's it. That's
Actually, I got hired on my birthday, so
wow.
my first day on the job, I was 47. So
happy birthday, and now here, go take that call over there on.
yeah.
Hey, rookie, go do that.
Rookie.
that joke's been out there a lot.
No, that is a tenured officer to be starting over at a new city. I mean, that is, you usually don't see that quite often in this profession, really. I mean, we have several people that leave Dallas PD, but they don't leave it usually with that 2 decades on.
It was very humbling. I had seniority over one person, and he came from the department I came from at the same time. So, but it was very humbling. In fact, there was one day I was walking through the hallway, and this young girl came up to me, and she says, "Oh, is your daughter Chloe?" And I said, "Yeah." You know where I'm going with this. She goes, "We went to high school together." I'm like, "Oh, God."
You just go put yourself on a sick day and go home?
Yeah. So I got a 21-year-old that had like almost 2 years of seniority on me.
That's
so
funny.
Dang. So, starting over, you had to go through an academy. I know you have a lateral transfer. Was there an academy you had to go through? Or?
There was not.
Wow.
The academy, I went through our Iowa Law Enforcement Academy in Des Moines. Cedar Rapids Police Department, they host their own academy. But the academy stuff transferred. Our pension transferred. Those were 2 deal breakers for me. I didn't want to start over on a pension, and I did not want to go through an academy. So,
because you talk about losing everything, that would
Right.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Right.
Losing time and time bank is one thing, but that
Right.
is your future. Right?
Yeah.
So when you got out there, what you say the crime in Marion versus Cedar Rapids, what struck you the most when you got out there, as far as how faster of a pace was it, and especially you have 2 decades of experience. You have 2 decades of maybe a little complacency that had set in as an older officer, and you also have all the time as a supervisor, and not like a supervisor frontline troop, but you're not one of a police officer at that point. So what did you notice about the pace of going to a new city like that?
When I was on overnights in Marion, or what y'all call deep nights down here, when I was on deep nights, my entire shift would handle 18 calls.
Yeah.
In an 8-hour shift. And when I came to Cedar Rapids, like just my car alone, we're getting dispatched to 18 calls.
Okay.
So there was a significant difference. Again, like I stated, the police work's the same everywhere. It's just the volume of it, and that's basically what it was.
anything unique in Iowa? Now, when I was there, it was anhydrous ammonia thefts were huge, and poaching, and guys would get into shootings over stealing somebody else's skins, fox skins hanging in a barn somewhere. I mean, it was crazy like that. But I mean, still violent.
We're not that rural.
Anything? Yeah. Thank you. That explains a lot about me. No, but I mean, is there anything unique about the Cedar Rapids area?
We're the second largest city in Iowa and second largest department. I think one of the bigger shocks I had is in the first 2.5 months I was on that department, I responded to more legitimate shots fired calls with actual shell casings retrieved than I had in 20 years in 2.5 months.
Yeah.
So that was a big shock. And when we would have something like that in Marion, everybody got called out. The entire CID unit would get called out, and we would, it was a deal. And now, I mean, you go to Cedar Rapids and we're like, you got rookie officers that are putting the tents over the rounds, and we're processing the scene ourselves. So it was a big difference.
So when you, how did the younger officers how did they look up to you or treat you whenever you got there, being an older officer but new to them?
Well, I walked in the locker room one day and I had a magnet handicap sticker put on my locker.
Oh.
So if that tells you anything.
Those bastards.
Yeah, so that was that.
There could be much worse. Put on your locker. I've done it. Trust me.
I think that the guy that came over with me, Brian, he's a few years older than me age-wise, and I think we both gained some respect from those younger guys just because they could trust us on calls. They could come to us, and we would be able to mentor them a little bit and help them out. But again, it was humbling because I was a peer with them. I just had 26 years of experience.
And what date do you remember? Did you start with Cedar Rapids?
August 30th of 2021.
Okay. Well, I wanna move forward to less than a year on with Cedar Rapids to an incident on July 30th, 2022. We're going to get into your involvement with this podcast and how we met later on in this episode.
Okay.
But I want you to, I want you to paint a picture for the listener. Okay, let's say that I just search. It's Kent likes when I do this. You're out in a car and say, I've caught up on Joe Rogan. I've caught up on this podcast. I want to find a new podcast, police podcast. So I do a search for nonprofit or a true crime podcast. And, what's this ATO Bridge and Divide? Oh, it's a Dallas badge. Okay, so I would start listening, and they start listening to these stories, and they're in Florida, or they're in California, or they're in Germany or Italy. They're listening to this story, and they're wanting to put themselves at the scene. Can you help put the listener at your scene in July of 2022?
Yeah, I was assigned to our northeast side, which is a lot of shopping, residential type area. So relatively quiet on deep nights up there. That particular night on the far southwest side of town, one of our canine officers called out that he had just clocked a car at 93 miles an hour, and I think it was a 45 zone. And he said he was trying to catch up to the vehicle. He then got back on the radio and said that that suspect vehicle had turned around and tried to take him head on, and it tried to wreck him out head on. He said he was going to go back after that car. Once again, that suspect turned around and tried taking him head on a second time. By this time, several officers were getting to the area and trying to corral this guy, but his driving and everything just got way out of hand and too crazy, and the commander said, we're done. We're not going to chase this guy anymore, and it's not worth the risk.
Did y'all have a chase policy that restrict, or was that just a judgment call right there?
We have a chase policy.
Okay.
But, I mean, we're allowed to chase.
Mm-hmm. We're very restrictive here in Dallas, and that's why I ask.
Yeah. And that was something new to me as well, because at Marion we were pretty restricted on chases. But in Cedar Rapids, we are allowed to chase. There's obviously the number of vehicles we can have involved in, you don't want to parade of clown cars behind the suspect.
So they disregard the chase because of how erratic and the suspect is driving.
It just got too dangerous to the public. I mean, granted, it was at 3-something in the morning. It just got too dangerous. He actually did try to swerve at an ambulance head on as well. Just, we weren't even chasing at that time. That was just witnessed by officers. So he was heading up on a road that was coming up to my district in my area. So, and there's a big long bridge that crosses our river to my side of town. So I sat up on that side of the bridge, and the decision was made that if he was coming across that bridge, even if we weren't pursuing him, that we were going to stop stick his car and get him stopped, just because his behavior was too bad. We needed to get him off the road the best we could. And we sat and waited. Nothing happened. And half hour went by. And so we just decided that was going to be the end of it. So I cleared myself from the call, and I started going down a back road. I was going to head over to the interstate, and I was going to go into the station and work out. And I'm about halfway to the interstate, and one of the officers, Blair Cavan, she got on the radio, and she's like, "Oh, I'm behind that car," and it's driving relatively normal compared to what he was driving. And so she was following that car, and they came across that bridge. But as soon as she said that, I was like, "Damn it, Blair! I just wanted to go work out." I was halfway to the interstate, so I turned around, made a U-turn. I started going back toward them, and they came off of that road and turned toward me, and the vehicle went past me. Blair was behind the suspect vehicle, and I turned around and got behind Blair. There's a lot of radio traffic, and so I didn't even get on the radio to advise dispatch I was there. There were other officers coming too, so I figured somebody would recognize that I was there, and dispatch could see it on the map. But the guy just stops like abruptly in the road. And
was he driving? How was he driving at that point when he stopped?
It was a very short distance from where he turned off, so I guess normal at that point, other than the fact he just came to an abrupt stop in the travel portion of the lane. Blair got on the radio and said the guy just stopped. I pulled up behind Blair, and then he took off. And when he took off, he did take off at a very high rate of speed, very erratic, jumped the curb, got back onto the road. And at that point, we were now following the vehicle at a distance, but relatively close, but at a pretty high rate of speed. He was probably traveling 70 in a 35. He was booking right along. As we're going along, Blair got on the radio, and she asked one of our sergeants, she's like, can I go ahead and try this traffic stop again? And there was a pause, and maybe a few seconds. And the sergeant got back on the radio and said, yeah, go ahead. So Blair lit the car up. I turned on my lights and tried to catch up to him, and at this point he had really kind of hammered down. And the road is very hilly, windy, and I came up around a corner, and Blair had gotten on the radio and said the guy had stopped, and they pulled over. And she was very calm on the radio. She's like,
what kind of neighborhood are we in right now?
Residential.
Okay.
It's heavily wooded, but residential.
Got it.
So when I came up around the corner, it looked like a normal traffic stop. Like Blair was behind the vehicle. To the left or to the north side of where this car stopped was nothing but woods. And I thought, man, this guy's going to bail. He just came out, he's going to bail. So I'm going to come around on the left side of Blair, almost, pseudo felony stop style. I can maybe cut him off and get a little. Again, I'm not a spring chicken. I needed a little bit of distance, to help me out.
Here comes your workout.
Yeah, yes. in a foot chase. And so I'm pulling around the left side of Blair, and as I do that, the driver's door of the suspect vehicle just flies open. And all of a sudden this guy starts to get out. I'm thinking, okay, he is getting out pretty slow if he's going to run. And then all of a sudden I see he's got a long black gun in his hand. So I'm screeching up to a halt, and I see him pull the gun up at Blair's car. And he is leveled at her. He drops the gun. He pulls the gun back up, levels at her, drops the gun. But at this time, I'd come to a stop, And I came out between my open door and my A-pillar, and I yelled, drop the gun. I didn't even get a full second drop the gun out of it. And he turned and leveled the gun at me, and I opened fire. At the same time, Blair had gotten out of her vehicle, and she'd opened fire on the suspect as well.
Did the suspect, did he shoot?
He did.
Oh, really?
He got one round off at me.
Okay.
We were at a distance of about 7 yards. So,
like a normal traffic stop. I mean, just
yeah.
So. How close was the shot on you?
I don't know the exact answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't find it was a shotgun, and it was a BB round type shot. So they didn't really find anything in the dirt hill behind me, rounds wise. When I had my interview later with our Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, the DCI, they talked about that shot, and they told me it was a couple feet from what they could determine from hitting me.
Now, Jen, have you ever heard that story in that aspect yet?
Yes. He came home and unloaded on me that day. That morning, he was in the PD, and I got up early to head into work, and it was odd. I got a text message saying, "Can you talk?" And so I called him right away, and I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And he's like, "I was in a shooting this morning." And it's like that gut-wrenching, where your stomach just drops feeling. And I'm like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, I'm okay. And he's like, "Can you come into the police department?" And I said, "I'll get dressed and I'll be right in." And so I drove down to the police department, and all I could think about was, he's okay. Is this a justified shooting?
Which, by the way, we've had this discussion. I said, don't ever ask that question again.
Yeah.
But look at
all that goes through your mind.
This is the environment today, though.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
That's the crazy part about it. Is everything now is built around liability and culpability when it comes to police work, and that's a legitimate question that you need to know.
Yeah, so that was one thing that went through my mind. And the other thing, I really hate to say this, but were they white or were they black? And I'm like, you just don't know anymore. And I'm like, I wanted to know what we were getting ourselves into. And I pulled in the PD, and one of his good friends let me in the gates, and he, Blake was there. He gave me a hug, and he's like, he's okay. And I'm like, I need you to answer 2 questions. And I asked him those 2 questions, and it was a big, just the weight lifted off me at that time. I'm like, I couldn't wait to get back to see him, just to put my eyes on him to make sure he was okay. But when Blake told me those answers to the 2 questions I had, I just felt a big weight, because I didn't know how my life was going to change and my kids' lives were going to change that day. So,
Well, there's change, right? That has caused a domino effect. It could have been a way worse domino effect, obviously, but when you got in there and saw him at the PD, can you kind of just describe like what was going on?
Yeah, at that point, DCI agent had already been in and spoken to me, and I had a peer support sergeant that came in, Ben Weary, and he came in just because there had been an OIS, and Ben and I had a relationship. He was my sergeant for 6 months when I was on the shift, and had a pretty good relationship, and the whole peer support thing was new to me. I had never experienced that, and he's like, he's like, you can have anybody you want, but I'm here if you want me. And I was like, yep, have a seat, So we sat down and, getting processed on all that. And, my buddy Blake, it's kind of funny because we had the last wishes packet that we fill out, and I had neglected to fill mine out for months, but we had talked about it. And Blake was one of them listed that I would like to come to the house if something ever happened to me. And so when I talked to Blake that morning on the phone, and he said, have you talked to Jen? I said, no, not yet. He goes, you want me to stop by the house? I'm like, oh God, no.
Yeah.
Don't stop by the house, you know? But yeah, it was a lot going on at one time when she got there.
And that was something you had never experienced, like at Marion.
We had one officer involved shooting. The officer shot at a subject, but he wasn't hit, but that was it.
That's the first time you had been involved personally, though. You pulling the trigger and being shot at.
Yes.
Okay, and that's a long time to go through a career, and then at that point it happens. So how was your partner? How was she holding up?
At the scene, she was pretty upset because she thought that when he fired at my direction, she didn't know it was me. She just knew it was another officer to her left. And she thought that officer had been shot, not realizing it was me. And she was pretty worked up about that until she found out, it was me. And I remember sitting there and her yelling. She's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I think so. She goes, you were shot at. Did you get hit? And I said, I don't think so. I think I'm good, as we're tending to the suspect on the ground.
So once he went down, you had to go up and save his life. Right?
Yeah, we did. Sergeant Briley had extensive medical background and training, and Sergeant Briley came on scene and really took control of that until the ambulance personnel got there. And we did. We ultimately saved his life. Sergeant Briley was able to pack one of his wounds, and which we were told later would have ultimately killed him had we not given him that first aid.
Talk about a mix of emotions. I mean, you show up and someone is pointing a gun at you, so there's absolute fear, right? Like I don't care who you are. If someone's pointing a gun at you, that's not right. You get a little bit puckered up by that. And then you're angry, right? It almost instantly goes from fear to anger, so you're fighting this guy back now. And then you go into caretaker mode right after that, and you're trying to save somebody's life. I mean, that's a lot of emotion
It's
in a few
contrary to
seconds.
human instinct. Human instinct is not, this guy just tried to kill me, so now we need to make him better. It's so contrary. And people that have that presence of mind, they're a whole different level.
Yeah. It was, I don't really think we had a lot of time for that anger to set in, because it was so quick, from firing the gun to getting up there and helping him out. But your mind, it's crazy what the brain does, because you're able to switch to those modes in a heartbeat. And, even looking back at the event itself, which I found this out when I met with my attorney a couple days later. We got done watching the video, the car cam and the body cam, and my attorney made some comment about me not putting the car in park. And I said, what are you talking about? And he's like, you didn't see that? And I said, no. And so he pulls the car cam, or my body cam, back up, and you see me flying up, and you see me going to put and we drive Ford Explorers, and you see me messing with the gear shifter, and then body cam is me between the A-pillar and the door firing my rounds. You see me get back in the car and then get back out again. Well, when I get back in the car, I actually put the car in park. So, which was all confirmed with our arbitrator system, is when I stepped out, I had my left foot on the ground and my right foot on the brake, and my right foot stayed on the brake while I fired my gun, got back in, put the car in park, and then got out and approached. So, I mean, I set my cell phone down at the house. I go to the bathroom, I come back, and I have no idea where the hell it's at, and how yet I can remember to get back in the car and put it in park.
It's funny. It's funny how the brain works under stress.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, you said earlier, you can either panic or composure, right?
Yeah.
So when you go back to you're doing your debrief and everything's somewhat calmed down, that's when kind of and Jen shows up and you get it all wrapped up and you get sent home, right?
Yeah.
And do Cedar Rapids, do you get put on is there like a leave? I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we and I need to back up a little bit, because when I came over to Cedar Rapids and people asked me why, I kind of joked and said, I want to do real cop shit.
Mm-hmm.
And
you want to do Steve Claggett shit.
Welcome to
Yeah.
cop shit.
Well, that
It's at your
morning,
doorstep.
that morning we're sitting in there, and one of the commanders stuck his head in, and he looked at me and he goes, "Is this the real cop shit you're looking for?" It's like, I just shook my head. I was like, I wasn't expecting it, because that was 11 months to the day that I was on the job there. So
Good for you.
But yeah, so that morning the DCI agent sat down. I had spent 40 minutes on the phone with my FOP attorney and talking to him, and he gave me all kinds of advice and everything. And he told me, he's like, go home, get some sleep, don't drink any alcohol, get to sleep, get rested up, whatever. The DCI agent came in and we talked, and he told me what's going to happen going forward. And he says, go home. I don't know if you drink, but if you do, you might want to have a couple drinks and then go to sleep. And I thought, well, who am I going to believe, the attorney or and I'm going with the DCI agent.
There you go.
Right. Whichever one said what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
But no, I went home, and Jen went to work, and I went home and tried to sleep.
Got quiet in the house, didn't it?
It did. I mean, I think I got 3 hours on and off. My phone was just blowing up. I should have shut my phone off, but in a matter of just over 48 hours, I think I had over 120 text messages from officers that I work with, officers I didn't even know at Cedar Rapids Police Department.
That's twofold, right? So part of it keeps you awake and it keeps your mind running over and over and over again.
Right.
But it's therapeutic to sit there and process it while you're thinking about it.
Right.
And to go back to the attorney versus the rep, we don't talk about it quite often. Joe and I have talked about it a little bit, but you said the brain does some crazy things, and the brain actually controls the rest of your body, so it dumps all those chemicals into your blood system, right?
Right.
So your adrenals are firing off like crazy. That's why you can't sleep. You've got all those other things going on. Whatever you had that day, if you were a drinker before, whatever, you've got all that in your body. So moving your blood, right, through a little bit of exercise is fantastic after you go through something like that. Pushing as much water as you can to get all that stuff out of your body, right? I mean, you have to, your body works in that manner. It takes what's bad and it pushes it out. Mm-hmm. But if you don't assist it with that, it just stays in there longer. So my advice, if you want a drink or two, go ahead. But I'm not a doctor. I'm just saying,
right.
You gotta flush all that stuff out of there. But sleep is absolutely important. But it's going to be hard to come across just because the way your body is designed and the things that fired off on that.
Yeah, and that night we went to her sister's house and hung out with family, and when I got home, I mean, I was out. I crashed hard, and it was a really hard 10, 12 hours of sleep.
So investigators were talking to you at what point? That night?
Yeah.
Did you have to give a statement that night?
No. We actually, so that happened on a Saturday morning at 3:50 a.m. We did not give our statement to the DCI until Thursday.
Okay. A lot of agencies were not this way. Dallas has always been, I don't know what they're doing now, but after shootings before, they were talking to you that night.
Right.
And they found out that there's so much going on with the adrenaline dumps about the recollection specifically.
Right.
And what your body's doing to yourself and the brain's doing to your body and stuff with, like Kent was talking about, that now the standard around most of the country is 72 hours minimum before you start giving witness statements. Mm-hmm. So I think that is a good benefit, because it's funny having been there, and then you have conversations and all of a sudden you remember little things like the deal with your foot on the brake.
Right.
It's amazing how you just don't realize that stuff while you're doing it.
And talking with Bob Gorski, he kind of said he got us the 72 hours, where our investigators now understand that we're not going to talk before we get a couple of sleep cycles in, and actually the video is a big deal for us. We get to preview our videos before we make a statement, because again, the brain does some crazy things, right? I mean, it gives you that super tunnel focus and the auditory exclusion and all that stuff goes on, and they want you to say what happened. Well, this is what happened in my mind, but here's what really happened, and now I can put those two together. I think that does a lot to keep officers from getting in trouble for saying something that day and then realizing later on, hey, that's not really what happened, but that's what I've already said. And now you're torn between, do I say, hey, I made a mistake in my recollection, or do I stick to what I said initially, knowing that there's something else to it? That's a weird place to be in when you're already worried about what's going on.
In that auditory exclusion, I'd heard about it, but
it's crazy, isn't it?
It is. If you go to the range and you shoot, I shot 8 times and Blair shot 4. If you go to the range and you shoot 8 rounds with your 9mm, your ears are ringing.
Yeah.
I don't remember a single shot. I don't remember hearing anything.
Did you know that night how many rounds you fired?
I did.
Did they ask you?
They did. Actually, my partner Blair actually asked me, and I told her I didn't want to say because I wasn't positive, but
Right.
I knew in my head approximately what, and I think I was one off.
Yeah, usually shooters, they'll say a number half of what they shot. Yeah, about
Right.
3 rounds. Next, 7, 8 rounds are fired. The other thing I'm going to ask you, I used to when I was teaching the SWAT stuff for 15 years, the questions I would always ask people in the classroom is, do you remember seeing your sights?
I do.
Good.
And I've talked about that with my therapist. I can remember the front sight. I
Good.
can remember the front sight of my pistol. And and I'm not a gun guy. I know how to shoot, and I know how to shoot well, but I'm not a gun guy. But I do remember specifically.
Good.
Looking down that.
Because the one thing, the distance, and you're well within that lethal distance, 7 yards. So
Right.
usually the distance, if you're closer up, guys will just point and blast, point and pray type stuff. The more distance you have, the more they tend to focus on sights. It's a security thing, again, a psychological thing, or a little bit of cover generally helps in something like that. So good for you for picking up your sights for something like that.
Yeah. And the other thing, you talk about the mind and recalling stuff. So the third officer on scene was actually Blair's fiance, who they were married a couple months later. So he was the third officer on scene, and we were out with them within the week after the shooting, and we were talking, and Blair had made some comment about looking down and seeing blood on her hands, and I was like, well, why'd you have blood on your hands? And she's like, because I handcuffed the guy. I said, no, you didn't. Such and such did. She goes, no, I put the handcuffs on him. And I looked at her husband, Paul, and she goes, I used his handcuffs. I looked at Paul, and Paul shook his head, yes. I was like, no, you didn't. And then I got to watch my body cam and the car cam, and I was like, I'll be damned. She did put the handcuffs on him. I don't remember that at all. I remember her going up there, but I don't remember her putting the cuffs on him.
It's wild, man. The brain is fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, your brain's like a slice of Swiss cheese and all those holes, and then you can try to you can make yourself remember or think you can remember certain things.
Right.
Then you go back and watch the body cam and you go, oh, God, I don't even remember dodging to my left, or taking this position.
Right.
So when you're home and you're off and you're processing everything, you and I we've had an interesting relationship, and I've actually had.
I don't know where this is going.
Yeah.
We should probably
Steve, don't leave.
Dim the
Please
lights
don't
and
leave. Yeah. So, I doing this podcast, I have met some really good people, civilian and police, and also firefighters have reached out since I've been doing this. I think we first started in August of 2021, and we've been cranking these out. And it's stressful, and it's fun, and it's sad, and it's exciting. But the best part for me is hearing from people, complete strangers that I don't know from across the country, from Cedar Rapids, Iowa to Oklahoma, California, Florida, New York, and also people that are non-police, people that may not have really appreciated the police as much. I get a lot of messages like that saying, I've never considered this of what y'all go through on a daily basis. That means a lot, and that kind of makes me proud, and also makes me happy that I actually named this thing Bridging the Divide. So you reach out to me, and you just kind of told me you had a you stumbled on our podcast and you started listening, and you growing up as a young officer, watched Dallas SWAT, and something spoke to you on this podcast and helped prepare you to perform better, and also help with the recovery after from something you might have heard from somebody. Can you kind of talk about that?
I was really seeking out a podcast on leadership stuff, and whether it be police leadership or just leadership in general. And honestly, an advertisement or something kept popping up on Instagram for ATO, and so I just saved it and didn't really think much of it. And then one day I was like, I'll check it out, see what it is. And I saw Misty's name on there, and I recognized her name from TV, and so I was like, well, I'll give that a shot and listen to it. And yeah, the episodes that I listened to, so this was about February or so of 22, so February, March. And so you guys had already had a bunch of episodes out, but just listening to the leadership that is presented down here at Dallas PD is pretty remarkable, and some of the people that were speaking. But then listening to people talk about their critical incidents and how they got through them, and whether it was through counseling or therapy and EMDR, whatever it might be, or just talking about it. And you got guys like Matt Baines and everything that are talking about that stuff, and then it's powerful. And I think that helped me when this moment hit to recognize that this is not normal to feel the way I felt.
The actual shooting, and then what happened after, because we do things somewhat by design. Usually we throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks, but we have professionals on like Dottie and Dr. T and Tanya Glenn,
right.
And because we want to educate, and a lot of it's education. Like I said, I always say the mission of this podcast is to motivate, inspire, educate, and at the very least, you have a cool ass cop story, or to be entertained, or you'll get a couple of chuckles throughout the episode, or punch your steering wheel in disgust, whatever. But we want to educate officers and civilians and firefighters, military, because critical incidents, they affect everybody differently, but there are also similarities that go on in your mind. And I guess did you at that point, did you hear any of like the doctors that we've had on?
Yeah, at that point I'd already listened to Tanya and Dr. T and the different things that they spoke of, and I'm like, okay, I'm living this right now, and I'm doing this, and we're mandated at Cedar Rapids. We have to go to one therapy session post shooting, and
what was that like?
I had a history with going to therapy before, but this was a new therapist, and so it was pretty powerful. But we talked about EMDR because I'd heard Tanya talk about it. I'd never heard of EMDR until Tanya's episode. So I did some research on that, and I guess, I asked this therapist, her name is Stephanie Halverson, and I asked Stephanie, I'm like, is this something we can do? And she's like, absolutely. Are you open to it? Because she goes, a lot of cops aren't, because it's a voodoo mind trick, and there's no other way to describe it. And she's like, if you're open to it, we'll do it. And so we did.
Now, you said you've gone to a therapist previously.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it would have been more beneficial to go back to that same therapist, or to have a relationship with the new therapist before you had a critical incident?
So the therapist I had seen, she had left her practice in the fall of 21. And so she was gone, and she was fantastic. And she had given me the name of another therapist to try if I ever needed anything. And so I think it was the late spring of 22. I was like, well, maybe a little maintenance, I'll go to that therapist. And I went to her, and just the connection just really wasn't there with her. Ironically, though, I had already had a scheduled appointment for the Monday after my shooting. So I went into that therapy appointment and told her what happened, and I'm crying, and she's getting all teary-eyed, and I walked out of there, and I thought, there's no way in heck. I mean, she's a great person and a great therapist, but I'm like, there's no way in heck she's going to be able to help me through this. And I mean, I knew it right then and there. And, I know that Dr. T talks about cultural competency.
That's huge, isn't it?
It is huge. And I thought, there's no way this gal's going to help me get through this. And so I didn't know where to go and who to talk to at that point. We do have a couple that our police department, sources out to. And I called the one and left a voicemail, and I didn't hear anything back for a little while. And so then I called Stephanie and left her a voicemail, and within 2 hours she called me. And so I was able to go to her, and yeah, she's been a godsend.
No, it's really weird having Steve here, and I'll go ahead and open up just a little bit if you don't mind.
Should I leave?
No, I'd love you to be here, because I want you to tell her, because I'm not sure if she listens to every one of these episodes, but I'd been on the department for 19 years at the point where I decided I probably needed to go see a therapist. And it wasn't a critical incident. It wasn't anything. It was just one of those, hey, probably need a little bit of maintenance, right? Like I don't want to get to the point where, oh God, I need a therapist and not know anybody and not have experienced it before. And so I jumped on our ATO website. I knew about the confidential counseling. I was looking at it. I probably jumped on the website 6 times before I actually filled out all the paperwork in its entirety. I'd do it and then I wouldn't. And then I'd talk to people about, hey, I probably need to go see a therapist or maybe, whatever. And I was back and forth. And then Steve and his wife came on the podcast before I was a part of it. And I heard the episode and I was like, that's who I can talk to. Mm-hmm. And so after listening to Dottie and understanding that she had done this job previously and not just, walked through it, a lot of people can say they're a police officer, but she was doing some pretty heavy stuff. So I was like, I can go talk to her. And I did. And it was one of those where we sat down for an hour the first time and she was like, I'd really think you would benefit from EMDR. And I was like, let's get it on. No question. Yeah. And it's exactly like you said, it's a voodoo mind trick, man. It's insane how it just fixes everything for you quickly.
And Blair was going to go to see Stephanie, and so she actually recommended her too. And so I was like, and I didn't know how that was going to work. I didn't know if that was a good idea that, my partner from the shooting is going to go see this therapist and I'm going to go see this therapist. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, it's probably not a bad deal because Stephanie's going to hear stuff that Blair tells her, and then she's going to hear something similar, if not the same thing that I tell her. And maybe something I say is going to help Blair, if she relays it and vice versa. And I'm just glad I did. It was, it's been good.
That cultural competency, I love that phrase. And I love the fact that we actually have therapists that are culturally competent that can help you with things that you're going through because they've either been through it themselves or they've talked to enough people to where they have that understanding. Because you really feel like as a police officer going to talk to just any therapist, you could kind of be looked at as something different, you know? But when you have people who understand it, it makes it so much more inviting and so much more welcoming to go in there and actually do it. And I push it to everybody that I talk to now. I mean, I'm a big fan of just having a relationship with a therapist for not that you need it right this second, but if I go through something else and it triggers something, I know I can go talk to that person. I'm not going to be weird about it at that point, So I think establishing those relationships is huge. I've told our wellness unit, Chief Ramirez, I think we should mandate it for younger officers. Start with the academy of, hey, you need to go talk to a therapist like quarterly, biannually, something to where you have that relationship already and you don't just walk into something.
No, I agree. It becomes an issue when you start mandating officers to go talk to somebody.
It does, but if you don't, then they don't take that step, and initially it would be weird, right? It'd be like, hey, why are we doing this? But once you start to do it, it's just like mandating body-worn cameras. Like, I promise you, if you didn't make them do it, nobody would have done it. And if you talk to 90% of us now, I'm not working again without one.
Right.
So it would have the pushback. A lot of people would say, hey, I don't want to do it. But once they do it, I think the benefit is so huge that they would say, okay, yeah, now it makes sense. And then after a year or two, that's just part of our culture. And that's how you change cultures, by making those decisions for people when they're not going to make them themselves. And I think we've seen in police work that we're not open to a whole lot of change and doing things different unless we're mandated.
Well, and there's two things cops hate, and that's change and when things don't change.
Yeah, the way things are and the way things are going to be. Yeah, for sure.
It's funny, back when I was on the street and even after that, and it's something that's missing today. A real good friend of mine was Chicago PD. He was assistant commander on their SWAT team. And he said, the thing is, therapy has become so important now because we don't have those impromptu type therapies, which was going to the bar, sitting with a guy.
Choir practice.
Yeah, that's it, choir practice, and talking about things. And it became an inadvertent counseling session. But just being able to talk about it with the guys that knew, and then, of course, there'd always be a side conversation later and stuff like that. But police don't do that anymore. And so it's kind of driven the need for more constructive, more deliberate type stuff, to where you're saying, hey, you got to go do this. When after each one of the shootings I was in, I had to go talk to our doc, Dr. Solomon Villa. And first time I get in there, scared shitless. I'm like, he's going to find out I'm crazy, even though Dottie told me I wasn't, I swear. And I get in there and it's like, so what's going on in the department now? Just talking to them. I'm like, nothing. Okay. And then it got to the point, the second, third one, it was like, what's going on in the department? And they got a little more personal. He's like, are you still able to get an erection? I'm like, right here? And he's like, no. But
I was about to ask you that too.
No, stop. But I mean, it was one of those things. He was, I didn't realize that he was actually observing me and the way I was sitting there and the way I conducted myself. And that was all part of the assessment. And he didn't want me to feel like I was being interrogated. And it was perfect. It was perfect. But, that's it. I was the better person for it. So
I think, toward the very end of my first appointment with Stephanie, and she made it very clear that this is a safe place. And obviously there's, HIPAA is in there, but this doesn't leave here.
Yeah.
And from prior experience, I knew that, if I'm not honest with her, then I'm not being honest with myself, and I'm not going to get any better, and I'm not going to get past this.
And that's, as a cop, we don't trust anybody already, right?
No.
So that's why I say you have to establish that relationship ahead of time. And I think that having that relationship is going to make it so much easier and so much more beneficial to actually go see a therapist when you actually need one.
Right.
Well, when Kent reached out, this is the first time I actually told Steve, and I didn't mention the name, that somebody reached out and said because of their episode, they decided to go see Dottie. But I never told Steve who it was. And now you just kind of said that, and that meant a lot to me, Kent, when you sent me that text message. I was like, wow. And like I said, I sent it to Dottie because that is rewarding for Dottie to hear too, as well as Steve, to hear that what they said, something in there, what they said struck you and resonated with you and wanted you reached out for help. So that means a lot. And how long did it take you how many years of your life to get?
Yeah, I mentioned it, like 19 years of police work, and then it took me about 6 months of talking about actually going to do it. And, the forms, I hate filling out forms. I don't understand why we still have to fill out forms over and over again. So I would start and then stop. I'd be 3 pages in, and like, I'm not doing 4 pages, forget that. And then finally I just woke up and I was like, hey, like you said, I'm not going to get better by not doing it. So let's go ahead and just knock it out and do that.
When Matt, whenever I got your email, and it was probably the best email that I've ever gotten. When it comes to this is long. It was long, but it was great email, and everybody saw it was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and it was amazing because of how it happened, and of you reaching out all the way 800 miles away to here in Dallas, Texas, to you're sending an email to a foundation, and it's from a podcast, and we all kind of sit around, and I kind of think I'm just a knucklehead in here doing something, playing around, and for that, to hear that something we may have said impacted you and helped you survive something physically and mentally, that means a lot. I just want you to know that. And whenever you sent that email, what were you thinking? I mean, whenever you just kind of because I got gratitude. When I read the email, I thought, wow, this guy is really just showing gratitude to what we're doing down here.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if I can put it into words, to be honest with you. And I can't pinpoint one particular episode either that was my holy crap moment. They were all pretty impactful. And yeah, it was there was a lot of gratitude. And the fact that cops are getting out there and putting this out there, and it's you're putting yourself out there to others to try and make that change and to try and do away with that stigma. And again, you get badass Steve Claggett sitting here, doing.
You're like a ringleader here. Yeah. Stop that.
He's putting himself out there, and I've recently met another guy who he's retired from Phoenix, I believe it is, Phoenix or Mesa, and the same thing, big SWAT guy, and he's being very vulnerable, and that V word is something that gets brought up a lot in my therapy sessions, and to be a cop and to express vulnerability is huge. Mm-hmm. Because you don't ever want to be vulnerable as a police officer.
No, it's a survival mechanism to not be. but then to recover for yourself, not recover as Matt, not Matt the officer. You have to be vulnerable and with yourself and with your spouse, and then your counselor. You could. I like what you said. You're not being honest with yourself if you're not really talking to your counselor or therapist. I mean, a therapist is only as good as what they're getting from you.
Right.
And if you're lying to them or you're giving them a watered down version of something that's going on, or an incorrect perspective, they're not going to be able to help you. So Matt, you emailed me and we went back and forth, and I think I actually texted you first, and then I called you, and we had a long conversation. We talked for like 30, 45 minutes, and it was a good conversation. And I then, during that conversation, we kind of talked about some episodes and some people we've had on that they spoke to you through their episode. So I got good old Baines and Chief Schultz, Tina, to give you a call because she's she's from Iowa too. Can you kind of tell me? And the reason I did that too is the wellness unit was just getting its legs under. It was just a concept at that point, but the wellness checkpoints were going to be the kind of the foundation. And what it is basically leaders and former leaders reaching out to peers to kind of just check on them, and because talking peer to peer, you're probably going to be a little bit more confident than talking to Rick from HR that's calling you, right? So Baines and Tina reached out. Can you talk about that? How that went for you?
Yeah, I was blown away by Matt and his candor and telling me, about how he went through things and how he'd been through 3 OASs and at the very end I thought it was pretty cool because he's like, this is my number. If you need anything, if your wife needs anything, have your wife call my wife because unfortunately I've made her a professional at this. And so he said, just she can call anytime. And that meant a lot, especially never meeting the guy before in my life, and yet he's willing to reach out and give that up. And I think it was about 4 hours later, I got a phone call and it said Tina Schultz.
You got inundated with
something Texas, and I was like, man, okay, so I'm getting a chief from Dallas PD to call me, and she was the same thing, just as welcoming and heard a local Iowa guy, got into some stuff, and she was awesome.
Yeah, they both texted and said that they had talked to you. I didn't know. We didn't never talk about how it went or what was said or anything, but I appreciated them reaching out, and Tina, she still reaches out occasionally.
Yeah, she does. I get a happy Thanksgiving text, and and she even give your number to Blair, or give my number to Blair, and if she needs anything, she can reach out and call me, and so I did. I don't know if Blair's ever reached out to her or not, but just the fact that she was willing to do that, never meeting either one of us, just speaks volumes of who they are as leaders. Yeah,
and that really is why I have the people that I get on that come on here I don't get just anybody to come on. It's somebody that is high character and somebody that I like, and I know that they're here for other people and they're good people.
Right.
And and I have a variety of folks and topics, but I don't have just anybody on here. So Tina and Matt, they're some of my favorite people, and there's no coincidence that Baines has been in several episodes. His soothing country ass voice is always a bonus. So and it's peer to peer. That is peer support 101. That is a peer reaching out to check on another peer. But just because you're 800 miles away, we're all still in the same profession, and that's what it's about. You don't have to work for the same agency. You don't have to know somebody. You have a little insight on them. They didn't know you, but you knew a little bit about them just because of this podcast.
Just a sliver of them, a sliver of their life and their story.
So you and I have been going back and forth, texting and emailing for months, and just touch base or to say hi, and then you kind of, you sent me a very impactful email, and it had an attachment of a story that you wrote. It was called the Rolodex. Can you kind of explain where that came from, that story came from, and and what it means, what it meant to you when you wrote it, and what it symbolizes.
And how that all started was in April of 2015. I was in investigations, and I was actually coaching high school soccer at the time too. And that afternoon I left work. We had an away game, and so my lieutenant and I had a little interaction on the way out, and I told him, I'm like, hey, you don't call me, I'll call you, type thing. And he's like, well, I'll call you if we have a murder. And that was kind of that was our last parting words. And I get to the soccer game, and we're 25 miles away or so, and I always had my phone on vibrate. For whatever reason, I didn't have the sound off, and I'm out warming up our goalkeepers, and one of the girls is yelling at me. She's like, Coach, your phone's ringing. Your phone's ringing. And I'm like, it's all right, ignore it. Went on for a little while. A few minutes later, they're like, Coach, your phone's ringing again. So I walked over and grabbed my phone, and it said private. So I was like, I know who this is. And it was my lieutenant. And he says, hey, I need you to come into work. We had a murder. And I started laughing because it's been like 2.5 hours since he and I just had this, joking back and forth. And I was like, okay, sure, whatever, LT. And he's like, no, I'm serious. I need you to come into work. We had a murder. And he said it was at the Hy-Vee, which is our big chain grocery store up in Iowa. I was like, well, I rode the bus down here, so I don't know how I'm going to get back. And long story short, I got a ride back from another officer, and that was there was a young lady. She was 29 years old, and she and her 7-year-old son had gone into the store to go shopping. She had recently broken up with a guy who didn't take it very well, and was causing her some grief. And she and her son were walking out of the store that day to the parking lot, and she was ambushed by him, and she was stabbed 32 times and killed. And it was very very brutal. I mean, she had stab wounds that were through and through, where there were marks in the concrete under her body from the knife that had gone through and chipping the concrete underneath. So it was a very brutal murder. Her 7-year-old son sat and watched the whole thing. They were living not quite a mile away, and he had the bags of groceries in his hands, and he ran all the way home. And they were living with another adult couple that kind of took her in. Lindsay Donald was her name, and he just walked in the house, and he's like, "Well, we're not going to need these tonight," or something to that effect, and gave the food to the guy in the house. And he said, "Mom got killed." And so when I got to the scene, Lindsay had already been removed from the scene and everything, but obviously as a team of investigators, and I became the lead investigator on that, but as a team we had to put everything together, and part of that was watching the surveillance videos of the murder, which damn my luck, but Hy-Vee had just put in the best HD surveillance system you've ever seen in your life. And so I had to watch that video, I don't know, 30, 40 times between the investigation and trial prep, and it was just over and over and over again of him killing her. What that did, though, as time went on, that was April 15, but as all of a sudden, like in the summer of 2015, like I'd start to get flashbacks or images of shit that happened in my career. And I should have prefaced this by saying that, my story's got inadequacies in comparison to stuff you've been through or stuff you've been through, but in the volume, the stuff that you've seen and the stuff you've seen and the stuff I've seen, in the volume of it, the thing that got me, that threw me off the most, was that I'd gone this far in my career and I'd been able to handle everything. And then all of a sudden one day I wake up and I'm like, why am I remembering this suicide from 1997? Why am I remembering this female we found dead in her house from 1999? And these things just kept flipping around in my head, and that's kind of how I equated it to the Rolodex. Is that these images would flip around, and they would either go super fast or they'd go super slow, and I dealt with this for almost a year, and it was daily. Sometimes It'd just be a flash, and sometimes it'd be, hours that I'd think about this stuff.
Anything kick it off, or was it just
That was
natural occurring?
No, that was the thing. There'd be nothing. I could just be driving down the road and it'd just start popping into my head. So obviously if there were triggers and, those things would kick it off too, but that was the kicker, was just driving down the road and that stuff would happen, or sitting at home. And then, yeah, I'd wake up, I'd have, night sweats, night terrors. I'd get up and I'd walk around the house, for an hour, 2 hours, and eventually get my, just fall back asleep because I wore myself out, And then in the summer of 2016, Jen and I were out for supper one night, and I ran into an investigator that works for the Cedar Rapids Police Department, Tracy Johnson, and we ran into Tracy and her husband, and we sat down and we were talking to them. And somehow Jen and Tracy got to talking about work, and something was said about the Lindsay's murder, and Tracy looked at me and she's like, "You ever gone and talked to a therapist?" I'm like, "No." Just about that quick. I'm not, that's not me. I'm not going to go do that. And Tracy told me her story about how, she had to go talk to a therapist, and she didn't want to. She was mandated to, and she didn't want to. And she felt sorry for that therapist because she's like, I was the grumpy cop that was sitting there and didn't want to be there. But some time went by, and the Rolodex just kept going. I mean, it just didn't stop. And it was a few weeks had gone by, and I was sitting at home one night, and Jen had gotten home from work, and I'd basically just been sitting in the pool all afternoon. It was a nice summer day in Iowa, and, and drinking beer, and we had a little argument back and forth, and she said, maybe you do need to go get help. I was like, well, think about it. And it was the next day I made a phone call to our EAP therapy, and I went to that appointment. Her name was Lisa, and met with Lisa, and I thought, oh, this is going to be, like a 3-appointment deal. 3 or 4 appointments will be done. I'll be cured. I'll be fixed. And that ended up being a 5-year repeated visits with her. But there were some times in there though where, like I said before, like I wasn't honest with Lisa, and so I wasn't getting what I should have got out of that. And a lot of that came to head around the spring of 18, I think it was, but in August of 2016, I got called into work one night for a suicide of a 16-year-old girl, and this was the day after our oldest daughter had turned 16. And it was it was one of those deals where the mom, and it was just a few blocks from her house too. It was only about 3 or 4 blocks from her house, and the mom had said she and the daughter were fighting, and the daughter's like, "I'm gonna go kill myself," and she stormed off, and she did. She went out and hanged herself in the garage. And so we dealt with that night, and I got home, and, I went to it was maybe midnight, and I went to the one place where I knew I could get some, some relief, and that was straight to the beer fridge in the garage, and I don't know, they must have had a sale on Tall Boy Coors Lights, because I seemed to have a lot of them that night. But the Rolodex had kicked in, during this investigation, and as I got home, and of course that didn't help. And you get to a point where, you want to make it go away, and you want to make it stop. And I didn't know how. I didn't have the tools. I mean, I've been seeing Lisa and going to Lisa, but it was beyond that. It was, and it's like, how do I do this? How do I make that go away? And the answer, unfortunately, was sitting in the appendix carry of my holster, and so I pulled my Glock out, and I sat there and I looked at it and I stared at it. And I'm not saying suicide was the answer, and I'm not saying it was an option, but it definitely was not off the table that night. And I looked at that gun pretty intently for a long time, and and intently enough where you can see the reflection from my fluorescent work light in my garage off the tip of that 40 cal bullet, and it's not something I ever want to look at again. And it's not something I ever want to get to a point in my life again where I'm at. And so that's why it's, kind of a coming to Jesus moment with the therapist and myself, and being real and being honest. That night it was about 2:15 in the morning, and I put it away, and I'm like, oh, God, I got to be done. And put it away, and I called Lisa's desk phone, and I just left her a message and said, hey, it's Matt. It's 2:15. Call me tomorrow. And the next morning about 8:15, we're sitting in our roll call, and again, I was in investigations. We had a roll call every morning, and my phone rang, and I saw it was Lisa, and I answered the phone, and she's like, are you okay? I said, nope. She's like, you be here in a half hour? I'm like, yep. Went to my lieutenant, told him I'd be back, and I went and saw her, and and she was upset because she's like, I honestly, God, didn't think you were going to answer your phone. And I didn't learn that for, I guess, that was about a year later, because I never told her how things went that night. I just told her I'd had a bad night, told her I'd gone to this girl's suicide, but again, I wasn't honest. I didn't tell her I sat there in my garage and drank and sat there and looked down the barrel of my gun and where things were at. I just wasn't honest with her. And I think it was about the spring of 18, I watched a documentary, and it was called Code 9, Officer Needs Assistance. And I watched that, and I was by myself at home. It hit hard. And I kept telling Jen that she needed to watch it. And she, and I came home one night. I was gone. I came home, and she was down in our basement, and television was going, so I figured she'd been on the treadmill or working out or doing something. And I walked in the room, and she's sitting in the middle of the floor, and she's just sobbing. And she's got that documentary going on the TV, and she looked up at me, and she's like, this is you. Every one of these people are you. And I recommended to Lisa that she watch it as well, and she did. And when I got in there, at that point, I knew it was time to come clean. And I told her about that night in my garage. And she looked at me, and she goes, I know. And she said, that's why I was afraid you weren't going to answer your phone the next morning. She goes, I already knew. It was just, at that point, it was time. I was honest with her. I was being honest with me. And it was time to get to work to make sure that Rolodex, we could control it and we could stop it, because otherwise it was just nonstop.
So what was it in therapy that actually helped put that away? We didn't do EMDR with Lisa, didn't do that, but we just did a lot of mindfulness stuff and breathing and recognizing when things were getting out of hand. And so when that thing would start to kick off, I'd do the square breathing techniques, or the the mindfulness meditation thing, and finding a place. And this is like, for the time, at that time I was coaching soccer, and that was my happy place. Like, I left work to go coach soccer. You would think going around being a bunch of dramatic 16-year-old girls, that was my relief. That was nothing. I could handle that. And so, the meditation for me was, feeling the grass, seeing the field, listening to the girls, and believe it or not, smelling those stinky ass cleats and shin guards. But that stuff put me back into check and got me back into reality. So, but it was a lot of that, and it was a lot of work. Why do you think you were hesitant to be honest for so long?
Because we're cops. That was my biggest fear, is we're cops, and that stigma, and you're gonna get to a point where is it gonna get back to my boss that I sat there in my garage that night and drank, and again, I'm not. It wasn't off the table, Finger was never on the trigger, gun wasn't in my mouth, but it wasn't off the table. And so if I'm honest about that, and it gets back to my bosses, what does that happen? What does that do to me? What does that do to my career?
And that's valid concerns. I mean, because you've seen it happen. You've heard about officers that do come forward and they're ostracized and they're disciplined behind it, when basically you're saying, hey, I need some help.
Well, and I'll tell you, prior to me leaving Marion PD, there was an officer who was going through some stuff, and he had a breakdown, and he went and got help, and I kid you not, man, he got his badge gone, his gun gone, and he got locked out of the PD. He wasn't allowed to come back to the PD. In fact, they had a sergeant and a lieutenant clean his office out for him when it was time, because he eventually was going to medical out. They cleaned his office out for him. So that set the tone for every officer in that department of what's going to happen to you. Granted, we've got a new administration, a new chief now, so that's done, I hope. But it still sent the message.
No, and I think that's common everywhere, because we've had similar things happen here in Dallas, with previous administrations where they've basically done the exact same thing, locked them out. We get bulletins about, officer safety about other officers, and that's got to be the worst way to handle that. I don't know who authorized that and who was like, that sounds like a great idea, because it's a horrible idea.
Right.
But no, your concerns are valid. Obviously we've been through that and we've seen it. So it's interesting to me that you went through the therapy that long, and then one day you're just like, hey, okay, now it's time to do this for real.
Yeah, it had almost been 2 years of therapy when I finally was like, all right, this has got to happen, because otherwise I'm just going to keep doing this shit all the time, and I'm not going to get better.
Where's the Rolodex now? How is it? How is it flipping over now, or has it come back?
You know what? It hasn't. I've done really good with it. It's been a long time, and that's something that Stephanie and I address quite often, and the question that's asked, and it's just not there. And I'm able to jump in front of it, and if I even remotely feel like, that's going to happen again, it is, knock on wood, 100% in control.
Because now you're equipped with weapons to battle it.
Absolutely.
What would you say to, there's a lot of people out here that aren't even first responders that are listening to this. What would you tell them? I mean, what kind of advice would you tell them to come forward and to eliminate their own Rolodex? Because we all have them.
It's a great question, because what works for me isn't going to work for you or her. But if you don't give that therapy a shot, you're never going to know. And if Tracy wouldn't have told me her story that night, I would have never went. A week or two later when Jen and I get in a little argument and I realized maybe Tracy was right. Maybe I should go get some help. But if you don't take that extra step, then how are you going to know? And like my partner Blair is a huge sports nut, and she says, was it Michael Jordan that says you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so if you don't take that shot and go into a therapist, but there again, you've got to find that one that works for you. And obviously I knew 2 days after my shooting, when I met with that therapist, that relationship was not going to work. And I felt bad calling her and breaking that off and saying, hey, but I owe it to me, and I owe it to my family, that all I'm going to do is just go back through the motions again if I don't have that connection with somebody.
Right.
Hey, Matt, go back to the Rolodex. You just kind of touched on it a little bit. Was it just images that you were experiencing?
No. Steve, it started off with images, but then it got to the point where, you could smell the gunpowder. You could smell the metallic, you could taste the metallic taste of blood, the sounds, I can still hear the horn blaring from a double fatality accident. 2 teenagers were killed. I mean, I can still hear that horn. And so for me to say that the Rolodex has gone away, it hasn't gone away, but I know how to control, and I've got the tools to deal with it. So thinking about that doesn't affect me like it used to.
Good.
But no, it's the sights, the sounds, the smells, all of it was there. And I think that's what made it the worst.
So your negative coping skills made things better temporarily and then got worse, or, the drinking.
Yeah, it just masked it all.
Yeah.
It was, the problem was still there in the morning. And I don't want to paint myself out to be, a raging alcoholic that was drinking, because that wasn't the case. It was just, if I got home and I was going to have a beer, then I was going to have 6 beers.
Right.
Because of what went on. But that didn't, that wasn't the focus of my life either, but it was what I used at the time.
Right. And then the positive coping skills here, the breathing techniques.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the other ones that?
Obviously with the EMDR with Stephanie that I'm doing now has been huge.
Can you break that down into simple terms, what that is?
EMDR?
Because my wife gave me an example of what it is, so I can read that, but I'd rather hear
voodoo.
From you.
That's what it is.
It is voodoo.
I'll give you the example of how it helps me. I mean, there was an image I had from my shooting that I just could not get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
And it was front and center every time. And I could tell my story, and I could sit here and tell my story. And when I got to that moment, like I'd lose it. Like I'd just start crying.
Right.
And so Stephanie asked me, she's like, you open to this? I'm like, yeah, let's, give it a shot. And so she uses the little buzzy things that go in your hands and, close your eyes. And I want you to tell me your story. When you get to that point, let me know. And she knew, because my eyes are closed and I'm telling the story, and I just got tears just running out of my eyes. And so, she turned on the little buzzy things, and, your eyes track the back and forth for 30 seconds or so. And she got done, she's like, take a deep breath, open your eyes, tell me what you see. And I'm like, I see a door. Like, I don't know. What do you want? Well, let's talk about your image and this and all. And I'm like, it's gone. She's like, what do you mean it's gone? I'm like it's gone. Like, I cannot picture that image anymore. And it was amazing. To this day, it's so grainy and pixelated that it doesn't affect me at all.
That's exactly how I describe it. Is it just took that whole image and it's so hard to see it clearly now. It's fuzzy.
Yeah.
It's almost like a vignette just laid over it, and you're like, where did it go?
And for me, it was so almost fake anyway, because for me, it was when he pointed that shotgun at me, the end of that shotgun looked like, like a Bugs Bunny, like 2 bowling balls, huge. It just looked massive. And that's what got me every time. And it's just gone. It's crazy.
Good. Anything else? Any other techniques? I know I'm assuming you're an athlete, play soccer a lot.
No, I didn't.
Really?
No, I
Okay.
just
Just
fell
like
in love with the game.
those
and
who can do,
got
those who
roped into
can't coach.
coaching my daughter when she was young, and yeah.
Still doing it?
No, I'm not. I resigned this last year.
Okay.
So it was 9 years. I had 2 high schools, and I actually did 3 years at Co College in Cedar Rapids.
Nice.
So with the women's program.
Yeah.
One of the big things is just as far as techniques is, talking about it and being vulnerable. And obviously here I am today, and I wouldn't have been here talking about this in a public setting had that OIS happen. If that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here. But I also wouldn't be here because of Stephanie.
Before we get too far off that, I want to hear what your wife gave you.
Yeah.
EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprogramming. Basically, just takes an emotion that you have, and through the light, and I don't think she uses the buzzer thing, but through that, it draws the memory to your forefront and then desensitizes it, kind of pushes it back to the back of your brain. And that's the knucklehead version, because she gave me the knucklehead version because that's all I can remember. But basically, it takes the juice out of the bad part.
Yeah, trauma lives in short-term memory, and that's.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so and basically what you're doing is you're putting it in your long-term memory, and that's why you're able to recall it all the time in that short-term memory, and so. So yeah, when it goes in that long-term memory, it's just there and it's gone.
She explained it to me as basically taking something that isn't put away and putting it away. So like taking the coat that you walk across the floor every day and actually putting it in the closet and hanging it up, and all of a sudden it's gone.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, exactly.
Do you and Jen, do y'all communicate better now?
I'll let her answer that.
Okay.
Good decision.
I feel after the shooting happened, he was off for 2 weeks, and then I was on a medical leave like 2 weeks later, and so we ended up both on leave together. So mine was medical, and he was off on duty, and so we were together 24/7 for weeks, about 6 weeks total. But we went from not seeing each other because once he went into and got on at the CRPD, he worked evenings and he worked weekends, and so we didn't see a lot of each other when he transitioned over there. And then the shooting happened, and then we're together 24/7, and we both laughed. We're like, how is this going to go? You know?
We're going to go from trauma counseling to marriage counseling real quick.
Yeah, but I feel like it actually brought us closer together, wouldn't you say?
No, for sure.
I've pushed him to do the counseling and to put the work in, and I've pushed him to show his vulnerability and put it out there to everybody, because what we've dealt with over the years, and it's affected me, it's affected our kids, and there has to be other families that are going through the same things.
Now, do you feel like because of what he's gone through recently that it's benefiting the kids and your relationship?
I think we're all a lot closer. After the shooting happened, like you said, I went to work. I'm in healthcare, and I had patients that had to be seen no matter what. I was the one on call, so I had to kind of get my shit together. I drove to the facility I was working at, and I knew my dad was an early riser, and I called him, and I'm sobbing, and then he's like, what's going on? And I told him, and he's like, shit. And I'm like, yeah. And I said, now I have to get my shit together and go into work and be that care provider to all my patients I was seeing that day. And, my phone was kind of going crazy too, people calling in and checking on me. And then I put my hours in and I got home. And we both had agreed that morning that we weren't going to tell the kids right away. He wanted to wait till I got home from work. And we sat down at the kitchen table and told the kids what happened and answered all their questions. And, we didn't know how it was going to come out on the media. We're small town, Iowa, it's like sometimes that type of incident hits the news, and the kids would possibly get text messages before we could actually tell them. But it was really smooth. We got the kids there and sat down and spoke with them, and there was a lot of questions, a lot of tears, and we didn't know what to expect, and so we navigated it all together.
So before all this, was Matt very open, and did he talk to you about things that happened at work?
Yeah, Matt tells me quite a bit of stuff.
Now, Matt, your turn. Do you actually tell her what happens at work?
Watered down versions.
Good point.
Yeah, watered down versions. But I also, I don't tell her everything.
So Joe and I discuss oftentimes when we have guests on their body language, and the entire time you've either shielded your wife or you've been comforting your wife. Mm-hmm. So part of you is shielding her from what you see, and that's natural, right? We don't want to force our trauma onto our spouses and our families, but you physically have been blocking her. So there is a little bit of that shielding going on, but it's a natural thing because we don't want to take all that, it's already screwed us up a little bit, right? Like, let's not screw up our families too.
Yeah.
I just thought he was shielding her from Claggett's sex appeal. But
what in the hell?
Steve, come back. Please come back.
Number one, that's impossible.
Sorry. I couldn't resist.
I think that...
Way to take a serious topic and shit all over it.
It breaks the ice a little bit.
The listeners are used to that.
No, I think that, I've done my best to try and shield them. I'll tell her stories and stuff like that. But, I also hate what this job has done to me.
Yes.
I hate what it's done to me. I hate what it's... it made the relationship with my kids tough, growing up, because I wasn't there, and I was short, and I was not the nicest person all the time. And that's because I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to cope with it. And this therapy definitely has helped, for sure. But there again, if I'm not being honest with her, then I'm not helping our marriage. I'm surely not helping our our family. And the other rarity in our life is that we've been married for 25 years this past October, and in law enforcement.
Yeah, no, that's
I don't want to say that's a unicorn, but it's pretty dang close sometimes.
The true unicorn is 2 cops married for that long.
Yeah.
True. And that, and us working opposite shifts has probably helped that quite a bit.
It does help.
No, the kid thing, I've got 3 boys, and they're probably the reason I ended up going into to actually talk to somebody, because our relationship was getting real rocky. I was short-tempered, and I was like, they're not bad kids. I've got great kids, but why am I so frustrated with what's going on with them? And if it's not them, then it's got to be me. And I don't want to be that guy that just one day blows up and loses it with my kids for no reason. So they were a huge part of me going in.
I totally agree with that. There was nights Matt would come home, days, and I'd be like, girls, Dad's in a bad mood. Like, stay away from him. Just keep your distance, because, it would end up in an argument, or he would lose his temper a little bit with them. And it was just easier to tell them, just stay away. We're going to go to the parks. Dad's kind of having a bad day.
Yeah. And that bothers you, doesn't it, Matt?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally.
No, Shelby Houston came on here and basically said something about, if you're not going to go to therapy for yourself, go for your kids. And I was like, man, that struck me right in the heart. Like, yeah.
But that being said, like yesterday I met one of the DFD guys, and and he made the comment too that, like with alcoholism, he's like, I guarantee you that if I have a guy come up and tell me that I'm going to get sober because of my wife, and I'm going to get sober because of my kids, I'm going to get sober for my family, he goes, that guy's going to fail because he doesn't want to do it for himself. And so, yes, you go to therapy for my wife and my family, but I got to go for myself. And that's where that honesty thing came in. And
right.
That's really been the hardest thing for me to, like I said, we're cops, and, in God we trust, all others are suspects. It's like we don't trust anybody, so we've got to come into the honesty for ourselves, or nobody's going to benefit.
That means a lot to hear I just heard that, what you got from the firefighter that we went and toured a alcohol rehab facility with a group of folks, and some firefighters were there. I saw you over there talking to him, and man, that's powerful.
Yeah, he was a good dude. And I think after losing my brother a couple of years ago to alcoholism, I could relate to some of the stories he was telling. I could relate to some of the stories they were telling at that facility, and how to relate to. So, yeah, but what he said was 100% my brother. He didn't want to get sober for himself.
Wow. Well, I tell all the guests that the Zach Talents or anybody else that we have listened beforehand and we get them on, like, now that you're down here 800 miles away, you're going to go back tomorrow. Yep. You have Kent and I cornered here on the mics. Favorite episode?
I don't know. I really don't. There's so many that I enjoyed listening to, and so many that I've picked up different things on, from Chief Garcia to Chief Foy, and Bob Owens. That one really struck a chord with me, with the leadership, when he talked about the narcotics officer that was shot and killed on the Blue on Blue shooting, and when he was asked to write up his idea for discipline for the officer that pulled the trigger against the other officer, and he said he recommended no discipline. And when I heard that, like, I just sat back and I was like, that guy gets it, because there's nothing you're going to do discipline wise that's going to make that officer, that officer's going through more than he'll ever go through in his life. So what good is a discipline going to do to him? And they've all just struck a chord with me, and they've all been really good. And I've got officers back home that are listening to your podcast. I got a really good friend of mine that he listened to the first couple, and he was like, it's too Dallas specific. And I was like, really? Is it? I said, because we're going through the same stuff, just on a much smaller scale, but we're going through the same stuff. And this podcast is now his favorite podcast.
Wow.
And
what's his name?
Willie Dobbs.
Shout out Willie Dobbs.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. What could we do better? What could Kent and I do with Danny, Misty still helping, Steve, He's been on as he's one of our reoccurring guests, and he's always.
I'm the one they beat up. I'm comic relief.
What can we do better to put a better product out for the other listeners?
I think just keep pushing the narrative that you're pushing. You know, when you said something to me months ago about coming on, I was like, "There's no way in hell I'm not going to come tell my story." And because there again, I didn't think my story was significant. And I heard another DFD guy that I talked to yesterday, and he said the same thing. You've been trying to get him to come on. He's like, no, nobody wants to hear my story. Nobody. The reality is that there are guys that are on departments the same size as I am and have probably seen as much or less than what I've seen, but they've been affected. You know, we've got an officer in our department that has been through. He's a rookie. Well, he was a rookie, and that guy he saw more in 6 months than some officers see in their entire career. And we're talking, we had a nightclub shooting where we had 3 people murdered. A couple more murders that he went to. The guy's been through a lot, and he was on scene for my shooting, and he had a hard time with that because he said he thought I'd been shot. He goes, "Yeah, I saw you fall back into your car." And he goes, "I thought you got shot." I'm like, "No, I'm just putting it in park." And he went and he started talking to somebody, and I did. I told him, I was like, "You need to go talk to somebody," and I pushed him, and I met his girlfriend at a conference that we had, and he was like, "This guy right here is the reason why I'm getting help. This is the guy right here why I'm going to, and I'm meeting with the therapist." And I think you guys need to just keep pushing that narrative because we got to normalize this, because the more that you hear and the more you realize that everybody is going through it, it's just what you do with it.
That's a great way to put it, man. It really is.
Well, like I said earlier, I actually am upset that y'all are leaving soon. This last few days with y'all, Laura, she's being quiet today. Red River kind of did her in, I think. And Jen and Matt and Bryson. I'm actually sad to see y'all go. I hope that y'all had a good time here in Texas, and you got to experience some better weather. You got to see some. Well, you didn't, Matt, but Laura did, some half-dressed people serving beers at a big honky-tonk here we have in Texas. I'm gonna miss y'all, and I consider you a friend now. We've been texting and communicating for many months, and I want to continue that. And if you have any other ideas, suggestions, you let me know, because I will listen to you. And I will take what you tell me to heart, and it's very nice. I'm glad I got to meet your wife, and everything that you've gone through and everything you've overcome. That they're the ones that you've helped yourself, but you've helped them the most, and your family is going to be so much better and closer, and I'm just proud of you.
I don't wish an officer-involved shooting on anybody. But because of that, I know I'm a better person today, but I've met some pretty amazing people, and I'm thankful.
You're still here, and you're going to meet many more amazing people, and you're going to do good things to help your peers combat what you've been battling your entire police life. You're going to help them put away those Rolodexes, right?
Right.
That's what it's about, and that's our mission, and that's your mission, and that's what we need as officers and first responders and just people in general. We need to keep helping each other. Everybody has their own Rolodex, and everybody needs to be equipped with tools on how to stop it from flipping.
For sure.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Matt.
Thanks
for sharing and being vulnerable, and Jen, thanks for being there with him. There's a lot of people that don't get the credit for sticking with their spouse, or even just being involved in a relationship with anybody that goes through the stuff we go through. And I know there's a lot of secondary stuff there also, but it's great to see you guys do this together.
Thanks for having us. It's been awesome to see the relationship that you guys all have together down here. So you guys got a really good thing going on. You just need to spread the word and keep doing what you're doing because you guys are pretty amazing.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you, Steve Claggett, for joining us. I knew I've been keeping it under wraps up until you walked in today, and actually got a good photo of y'all shaking hands.
I'm just happy to hang out with some people that have class for a change. You two knuckleheads. What the hell?
Thank you, Kent. Thank you, Laura, for coming down here and spending a few days with us and actually buying our snake oil salesman job. Go back to Cedar Rapids and report that Dallas knows what they're talking about. Seriously, thank y'all. And if anybody out there needs to contact us or they have an idea, if they just need to reach out like Matt did, Matt can attest, I will respond. atobridgen@gmail.com. Just reach out, and even if it's just a vent or to say hello, I will respond to it because it means a lot to me. Meeting these great people and 800 miles away, it means more to me than they'll ever know. Thank you.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. I'll never give up on you. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up on you.